And the laughter this morning. What's the problem? Does that remind you of anybody? Does that remind you this morning of yourself? But let me ask you this morning, is there anybody here this morning who has not made one complaint since they've got up? You've never complained, you've never said, oh, you've made a thing that I just don't want to, or you've found a fault in somebody else. How many of you came in and said, oh, the air conditioner's too cold. I would rather it hot. I wonder why we do have a critical spirit. You know, it's very difficult not to find fault with people or things. We do it straight away. When someone steps on our toes or someone doesn't do what we want, what do? Oh, that's a rude person. They didn't think about me or what I was doing. Well, I hope we don't look like this fella, but, you know. The passage that we're looking at today, as we continue to look at the Sermon on the Mount, is Matthew chapter 7, verses 1 to 6. And we want to talk about people who believe they're always right and everybody else is always wrong. Have you ever met someone like that? Maybe you better not answer that. But I'm sure we've run across people, they're never, ever, ever wrong. And you're always wrong. They're always right. And you know, our scripture tells us this is not an intellectual problem. It's not a physical problem. But what it really is, it's a spiritual problem because it's an attitude problem. And people with a critical spirit are always finding fault with others. And if you've run into them, they find faults and they look for them until they find them, no matter how small they are, as long as they found them, just to prove that they're right and everybody else is wrong. And as we've been looking through the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus has been showing us a little bit about ourselves, or a whole lot about ourselves, to see that the world in which we live is more than just about externals. It deals with the internals as well. He's focused on our religious perspective, and by that I mean he's told us about our giving, he's told us about our praying, he's told us about our fasting, he's told us about our money and material possessions, and he continues to contrast the religious leaders of his day who had a life of superiority as opposed to what he was proposing in the Sermon on the Mount. And here, in these first 12 verses, we're only looking at 6 this morning, he's dealing with human relationships. And these first 6 tell us what we're not to do. And the first one he says is, the caution examined, don't judge others or you will be judged. All you Greek experts, you're up there, you can have a look at the Greek to follow it through if you want. Now, it's an interesting statement. Don't judge others or you'll be judged. What does that actually mean? Don't judge others or you'll be judged. Now, this is the kicker. If you can tell me and I'm satisfied with it, I'll give the benediction and you can go home. Short sermon. It's an incentive for you. Come on, Rhonda. It's your opportunity. Yeah, we'll get to that. But you see, How many times have you been talking to somebody and they say to you, you have no right, this finger comes out, you have no right to judge me. Who do you think you are? You ever had that? Well, you must live in insulated worlds, because there are a number of people who will tell you that. You have no right to judge me. Who do you think you are to do that? Does that mean then, if I take this text, does it say I should never criticize anyone? That I should never condemn anyone? That I should never discern or evaluate anything? Because really it's not my place, is it? Because I might offend you, and we wouldn't want that, would we? You see, our society has developed an intolerance for people who have strong convictions and are not afraid to confront society or speak out about injustices. These type of people know what they believe and why they believe, and they're not afraid to tell you. Today they are branded as controversial or troublemakers for not getting with the modern agenda. And the Greek word here, as you can see, is the word krino. And you would think, what's that mean, krino? It's not hard. To judge. Well, let me tell you, in the Greek, it's got 20 different meanings. So which one do you want? I can spend a whole sermon on the different meanings if you like, but I'm not going to. How do we decide what it's being talked about that we're not to judge? And that means we have to look at the context of the passage. Who is Jesus speaking to? What is he speaking about? And who are the people that are in his sight? The Pharisees. To determine and understand what it means, don't judge, don't criticize each other. Because the reality is, Jesus isn't against judgment or evaluation. Because when we go through Scripture, there are things we're told to discern. There are things we are told to evaluate. And there's another Greek word called dokimazu. There you go, there's a word for you. Dokimazu. And what does that mean? I'll give you homework next week, look it up. But it has the idea as if I, as an employer, advertising for a position in my company, and I advertise in the paper, and I get 20 people that apply for that job, how do I decide which one's right for that job? Do we just go, eeny, meeny, miny, mo, you'll do? Is that how it works? No. You evaluate, you discern whether this person or that person is the right fit for my company and the job that I'm advertising. So that's the idea of evaluating, discerning a person that is fit for the job. So we're not told don't do it. There is a certain aspect here that he is talking about. The criticism or judgment that it's speaking about here is judging another person's motives. Now, motives are hard to see, aren't they? But do we judge another person by their motives? Do we judge another person because they don't talk like us? They don't dress like us? They don't act like us? They don't meet our standard of approval? They're not on our level? And so we find fault with them? I'm sure that if I walked into this auditorium one day with purple hair, I would get your attention. But would you find fault with me? I am sure you would come up and say, Pastor, when are you going to grow up? When are you going to stop acting like a teenager? Now, you're judging my motives. Most of you were never around when I was a teenager. So you don't know what I was like. So you can't judge me. But this is what we often do. And the issue that Jesus is speaking about, I like to call it a character assassination. We're good at assassinating a person's character. And what Jesus is saying is, as Christians, we have no business doing this kind of thing because it's not our place to do so. We have no authority to judge a person. And at best, as human beings, we all fall into the traps of assumption. We assume things. And it's very easy to do, particularly in the modern world in which we live. Now, how is a person judged in our world today? Is it on the basis of merit? Or is it on the basis of social media? You see, social media, if I want to know anything or everything, where do I go? Social media, Dr. Google, Facebook. What's the other one? TikTok. Anything I want to know, that's where I get my information. And what do we find? People can say anything and everything about another person. And what response have you got? None. The damage is done. It's done. And often we will see it on our TV screens or news. Here in Australia, we've had some real good ones over the years, the controversial ones. And you know, it's not so much what the lawyers and lawyers don't say. Before the trials even take place, social media has already been judged during execution. And what have they done? They've expressed their opinions. They've expressed their perceptions. But do they really know the truth? Do they know the facts and the evidence? And by putting it out there, we assumed, oh, it must be right because we saw it on TV. We saw it on the media. They don't lie, do they? Well, you see, a lot of them are speculations. And as human beings, the reality is you and I are not God. We cannot know everything. And because we don't know everything, we will get things wrong. We're not to make hasty judgments that are not really warranted about people or persons. And we have examples of this through the New Testament. When the Colossian believers were judging each other for not keeping a new moon or a Sabbath or a feast, even though these things had been done away, they were still being judged by other believers. And it's not up to us to come up with a set of standards and then enforce them on everybody else or alienate them if they don't meet those standards. This is how superior and inferior attitudes develop within the church and destroy it from the inside out. I like to think of a picture in my mind of a person with a real critical spirit. It's like a dog with a bone. You give a dog a bone, and it doesn't matter what you say to that dog or what you do to that dog, they'll not let go of the bone. They'll be persistent and unrelenting. They'll never let up. They'll keep going. And the reality is, when you have a critical spirit in judgment all the time, you're doing something that God doesn't even do. We're told that God, who is rich in mercy, he is not persistently critical of us. And Jesus is saying it's unacceptable behavior to the child of God. It's bad enough that we make that decision within our own hearts, but instead of keeping it to ourselves, what do we tend to do? If you've got some juicy bits of information, what do you do with them? You sit on them, right? You don't do a thing with them, right? Don't lie. What do you do with them? you go and say, hey, I got something to tell you. You're going to really love this. So you go and you blab something to somebody else. And you know, what does that person do? Being good Christians, what do? They sit on it and say nothing and say, you shouldn't be talking about people like that. What are they going to do? They go and tell, hey, did you hear what the pastor said about such and such? Well, he said this. And before you know it, it's gone around and you've got a bushfire going. We become gossipers, and that's even worse. But what's wrong with a critical spirit? What does it really tell me about myself if I've got a critical spirit that's always finding fault with people and things and objects? Okay? But it also indicates to me I have a wrong view of God. A wrong view of God. Do not judge others or you'll be judged. And that's reminding us here, you and I are not the final arbitrators that pronounce judgment on people. That authority belongs solely to God, and we're not God. And this is the issue here. It is a sin for us to judge other people and their motives, because when we do it, and most people don't stop to think about it, when we judge others, we are playing God. We are playing God. We are taking God's rightful position and we're making it our own when we make judgment on other people's motives and the things that they do. I don't know about you, but I can't look into a person's mind and understand what they did. I might be able to nut out a few things, but I haven't got that ability. And I'm not God. The possibilities are endless when we think about being critical or judgmental of others. We criticize their motives. We evaluate them. We pay them back. And each time we do those things, we're playing God. Not something we want to think about unless we are God. But we're not in a position to make any of those judgments about people. Because when we set ourselves up as the sole authority, as the sole judge, we become jury and executioner. We're the ones that are calling the shots. We say what fits and what doesn't. We're the ones making the standards. And when we do this, we've taken God's place and we've taken God's authority. And let me say this. Every person here has been guilty at one stage or another of doing this. We might not want to admit it. We've sat and we've evaluated people's ministries. Now, you wouldn't do this. You wouldn't. Well, some of you have said. When a pastor has presented his message and come out and you say, you know, Pastor, you must have had an off day today because you were dull and boring. You missed it. We've made a judgment, yet we don't know fully the motives. We can judge other people, and we do, as far as what they present. We criticise their teachings. We might criticise how they live their lives and their attitudes. And Jesus says simply, don't do it. It's not who you are, and it's not part of what you're to do. And every time I criticise someone because I don't think they do things the way I want them to do, or because I think I've figured out why they do what they do, then I'm passing judgment. And I'm setting myself up as God. Don't do it. Don't play God. Now, as I've said before, don't misunderstand. It doesn't say we can't discern things. The difference between good and evil, between truth and error. And there are things in life that we are to evaluate and make judgments on. But here Jesus is talking about the critical, judgmental, condemning egotism of the religious elite of his day. That's who he's got in his sights. They weren't criticising people because of their sin. They were criticising them because of their personality, because of their character, because of their weakness and their frailties, the way they looked, the way they dressed, or the fact they didn't do the things the way that they, the Pharisees, did them. They criticised their motives, which they couldn't see or know why a person does what they do. This is what Jesus has in mind when he says, do not judge, as you'll be judged. And it's a caution for everyone to make sure we don't have a constant criticising spirit that's critical and fault-finding of everything and everyone. It doesn't take much to get in, have an attitude. Often we'll say, boy, that person's hard to please. You know, the coffee was too cold or it's too hot, didn't have enough milk, didn't have enough sugar in it, wasn't stirred the right way. We can find innumerable faults if we want to. And Jesus says, that's not what we want. Then he says, you will be judged in the same way that you judge others, and the amount you give to others will be given to you. This is another caution. And it tells us, really, we don't have the perspective or the full perspective about another person. We do not know why they do what they do when they're doing it. So we cannot know their true motivation in these things. And as I thought about this, I thought, how many times have we done something and we sat back and said, why did I do that? You know, you ever find yourself in that situation? You think, what did I do that for? You've got no reason. You can't come up with a logical explanation of why you did what you did. So if somebody else is looking at you, what chance have they got? Yet, we do it. We look at that person and say, yep. We point the finger. We've made a decision. And the interesting thing is, if we're guilty of having a critical spirit, we somehow think we're immune. You know? We're immune from any judgment. That we have it all together. And that we're qualified to sit and make judgments on other people. And no fear of reprisal. And Jesus says, yeah, think again. Because you're going to get back exactly what you give out in your judgments to others. It's going to come back and bite you. Now think about that for a moment. How we judge others, we're going to get the same in measure. Now I don't know about you, but that scares me a little bit. Because sometimes I can be pretty savage in my judgment of people. And what Jesus says, hang on a minute here. The same method, the same way and standard of judgment you just gave that person, it's going to come back on you. You're going to get the same thing. And we think, oh, it's not what I want. But that's what's being said. And in Luke, it says, don't judge others and you'll not be judged. Don't accuse others of being guilty. You'll not be accused of being guilty. Forgive and you'll be forgiven. Give and you'll receive. You'll be given much. Pressed down, shaken together, running over. It will spill into your lap. The way you give to others, what does it say? Is the way God will give to you. Wow. Now that gives us a sense of our human relationships, because the sense is, if I treat you good and proper, what should I expect? I should get the same treatment back, isn't it? If I'm kind and I'm generous to you, shouldn't I expect that just out of human courtesy, I'll get the same back? Oh. I didn't say I was going to get it, but isn't that something I should expect? And most human beings do expect that if we do the right thing by somebody, it will come back the right way to us. But that's not the point that Jesus is making here concerning God's judgment. God is going to judge you or evaluate you according to the same knowledge you judge others, or what you think you know about other people. It's a word of warning about using the same method, the same knowledge that you use to come to your conclusion. God said, I'm going to use it against you. And you better be able to prove whether you knew enough to be judged in the same way. And he's saying, if you think you know everything about everything and everyone, then you can sit on the seat of judgment. You can show yourself worthy to live up to all the expectations that you have put on others. Now, this was the problem with the religious elite of Jesus' day. They had a wrong view of other people. They thought they had an escape clause when it came to a critical spirit regarding other people. Jesus said, hang on a minute. There's no double standards here when it comes to this issue. Everybody's going to be treated exactly the same way. And in Romans 2, he says, if you think you can judge others, you're wrong. When you judge them, you're really judging yourself guilty because you do the same things they do. God judges those who do wrong things, and we know that his judging is right. You judge those who do wrong, but you do wrong yourselves. Do you think you'll be able to escape the judgment of God? Do not judge others when you're guilty of doing the same thing. You don't have diplomatic immunity when it comes to judgment. You judge, you'll be judged by the same things, the same criteria. To have a critical spirit is to be in constant judgment of others, and it means we're playing God, and it's serious. And it's serious because when it comes to me and it comes to you, I'm biased. Have you noticed that? And when you judge me, you're biased as well. When it comes to ourselves, we are biased. We're biased by our own pride. And we don't have all the facts to make that judgment. And I came across one commentator who used this illustration. I think it drives home the point about being judged by the same judgment. And he said in Persia once there was a judge. And this particular judge was bribed. And he rendered a wrong verdict for money. Now, Cambyses was the Persian king. He heard about what happened, and so he ordered the judge to be executed. And after the judge was executed, he went further. He ordered his soldiers to skin him, to strip off all his skin. So he took off all the skin of that judge. And you know what he did with it? He covered a chair with it. And on that chair sat every judge from then on who judged in the court in Persia. What do you think that message was? Would you have got the point? Would you have wanted to be a judge, knowing that my skin would be the next one that's on there? It's a good incentive not to make bad judgments there. And then the challenge is expressed. Why do you notice the little piece of dust in your friend's eye, but you don't notice the big piece of wood in your own eye? Another reason not to have a critical spirit of judgment is because when you're busy judging others, you get the wrong perception about yourself. None of us has the time, none of us has the effort to go around digging up the faults of other people. Let's face it, there are better things to do with our time and effort. And it's a rather weird picture that Jesus presents. Here's a person who sees a speck of dust in his friend's eye. And I can imagine as most of us have had, something we get in our eye, it's only small, it's irritating. And we don't like it. It hurts. And you can imagine it causing some frustration. And there you see your friend. And he says, you offer to help him out. The only problem is that what you have in your own eye is a 2x4. He's got a speck, but you got this 2x4 that's sticking out. So how much help are you going to be to him, really? He's got a speck, you've got a 2x4. How are you going to help? It's a case of the blind leading the blind. How do you help one another when you've got problems? And then he says, oops, how can you say to your friend, let me take that little piece of dust out of your eye? Look at yourself, you still have that big piece of wood in your own eye. What's the point? Jesus is saying, see how unfit we are to judge others because we can never be impartial when it comes to ourselves. We hold ourselves to a different set of standards than others. And when it comes to seeing other people's faults, they're as big as planks of wood. As far as we're concerned, we can see them, how huge they are. But when we look at our own faults, that's different. Ours is only small, just little. And we don't see anything major because we're blind to our own faults. People who are very critical in spirit see the wrong in everyone, but nothing wrong with their own life. This is an attitude of self-righteousness, of superiority, of pride. And when you're like this, you cannot help anyone, yourself included. Because let's face it, we have enough problems dealing with and sorting out ourselves, let alone other people. And we need to start looking at ourselves before we look at others in judgment. The issue is we allow ourselves to be God. And this is the worst thing we can do. And Jesus condemns it. And I don't need to give you illustrations of how we go about doing this, but they're there. And we need to be aware of how we criticize people because of their looks or because they don't measure up or they're different from what we are. He then gives some counsel. You hypocrite, first take the wood out of your own eye, then you'll see clearly to take the dust out of your friend's eye. And I can see myself seeing Jesus saying, you hypocrite, when did you become a fully fledged eye doctor? How come you cannot heal yourself with your faults? Stop pretending to be something you're not qualified to be. Don't be a phony. The best thing you and I can do is to get on top of our own issues and deal with them before we start diagnosing and specialising in the faults of others. We need to see a specialist to see how badly things really are for you with our critical spirit. You have no help, and you can't help yourself. And I know that when I had the tumour behind the eye, I couldn't see behind the eye. I had to see a specialist. And they have these wonderful machines that look deep beyond your eye to find out. And then they order scans that just confirm it. But until you actually go to a specialist, you remain undiagnosed. You can't get treatment because you're unaware of what is happening. And that's what Jesus is saying. Take a good look. See that you have a spiritual problem yourself. See your own faults for what they are. Then get rid of them before you start on somebody else. And stop your pride and arrogance. Stop playing God. Now, how do I get rid of a critical spirit? Is to confess it. Acknowledge it for what it is. Understand you'll not be judged by God when you deal with your sin. Make these things right with Him And then we're in a better position to be able to go and help our brother and sister in their journey of faith. Be an encourager rather than a judge. Don't be a judge. Now this one, as we finish in this verse, I thought was rather interesting. Don't give holy things to dogs, and don't throw your pearls before pigs. Pigs will only trample on them. Dogs will turn to attack you. And I'm thinking, why put this here? So he turns now from a critical spirit of judgment to press home a point of how useless it is to give valuable and precious things to dogs and hogs because they don't appreciate them. Now, what do I mean by that? Here's the picture. You might have these beautiful pearls. Would you throw them out to pigs and dogs? And I can tell you the pigs and dogs that they're talking about are not like our domesticated dogs or pigs here. They were very rabid. They were very vicious. And what he's saying is, here, your precious things, you wouldn't take them out and just throw them into the mud and dirt for the pigs and for the dogs. And there are people who will mock and scoff at religion. There'll be people who ridicule and scoff the Bible and hate spiritual truth. And what Jesus is getting at here is, don't waste your time with such people. You'll only get hurt. There are people in this society and in our world who couldn't care less about spiritual things. They're insensitive to anything holy. They have no reverence for such things. They remain indifferent and unimpressed. I've met them, and I'm sure that you've met them. And it's not a matter of, well, if I don't tell them, who else will? You can tell them, you can present them, but you don't keep on telling them and giving them the same stuff when they throw it back or throw it away. And that's what Jesus is saying here. What do they do with spiritual truth? There's the trampling, ridicule, mock, attack it. They don't value or want it, so they throw it away as useless and they stamp it under their feet. There's the turning. They appear at first to be interested, then suddenly change to ranting and raving. They go from friendly to hostile. And there's the tearing. Their intention is to rip you apart by attacking your character and personality for believing such things in order to humiliate and to embarrass you. So what Jesus is saying is, there's going to be some people in our ministry where we don't share the gospel with. And that might be a hard thing to grasp. He's saying you need to be discerning in your ministry. There will be people who will hear your criticism and they will respond to the work you do. They'll respond to your words and the effort you put in, and they'll be encouraged in a positive way. But he says, don't waste the precious truths on these people who are looking to rip it apart without any thought given to what they're ripping up. They will not care. It makes no difference to them. What Jesus is saying is that we need to come to a time or a place where we need to evaluate, what am I achieving with my ministry to these people? And I need to be careful, particularly when I deal with false teachers and those who consistently resist the gospel. I can share the truth with them, but then what am I to do? You see, as Christians, sometimes we think it's my job to convert someone to Christ. Let me emphasize this again. It is not your job, it is not my job to convert anybody. There's only one person that can convert a person, and that is God. It's not you or me. We are instruments that are used to share the good news. And we sow, if you like, that seed to people so that they can have an opportunity and let the Holy Spirit take it and change a person. So we have to come to a point where we leave them for God to take care of. We've sown the seed. And he might send another messenger across or somebody else across their path. But that's not my concern. God will take care of them. He says, don't let them trample underfoot the precious truths of the gospel. We also need to be careful how we use the Bible and in what situations. Now, can you imagine what it would be like? I'm the pastor of a church, and I'm invited, and I probably will never be invited, to speak to a convention of atheists. Do you think that I'm going to get a warm welcome? Probably a toasty welcome. But what do I need to be careful of when I'm speaking to them? Can I speak to them the same way I'm speaking to you? You see, I know that in certain groups or certain areas, I need to be careful that I don't allow the Bible to be mocked or ridiculed by what I say. Because I know that in certain areas, there are certain truths that these people are just not going to accept no matter what happens. And I need to be careful in how I phrase it and don't give them an opportunity to mock or ridicule or trample the Word of God underfoot because of my presentation. Jesus isn't against making judgments or being critical when the need arises, but he wants us to be discerning about how we deal with sin in our own lives. We're never to set ourselves up as judge, jury, and executioners. We've never been given that authority. It all comes down to the right attitude and how we use it. Are we criticizing or discerning to know the truth and honor God? Or do we just want to blow our own trumpets about how good we are while we hurt others in the process? And I guess the challenge is, are we guilty this morning of having a very critical spirit, of being far too judgmental of others? Jesus says, don't do it. Stop it. It isn't who you are as a child of God. And if you're to get nothing else this morning, I'm going to close before the ministry team come with a little video. It probably sums it up better than what I've done. So it's only a couple of minutes. If I put you to sleep, this might wake you up. Take something away from it. Don't be judgmental. Just evaluate it for what it is.